It's all yours.
Hi, good morning. Welcome to the Bucky call. Today is September the 10th?
The 11th for you and the 10th for us.
Okay, the 11th. So let's start with Anne. Anne, how do you feel? What do you expect?
I'm glad and happy to be back in the call, and expecting to catch up. That's basically it. Yeah. And Susan, how do you feel and what do you expect to get out today?
I feel very happy to be connecting with you folks. I was thinking maybe it wasn't going to happen. Yeah, I'm just excited to share and learn. And Joe, how are you feeling? What would you like to get out of today?
I'm feeling a little bit tired. I'm losing my voice a little bit. I had just come from a family affair. So it was, so I'm coming home to another family affair. So that, it's nice to be here this evening. Great to see everybody smile. I'm just looking to build on what we were working on last week. And then I still have been thinking about Wednesday's call, to be quite honest. I've been thinking a lot about that lately. So yeah, just looking to build on what, Utopia and Oblivion, some of the principles that we talked about in the past, and I guess Manu, or Anne, did you go yet?
Yes, I have.
Manu.
Well,
How do you feel? And what would you like to take away from today?
Yes, I feel really privileged, and I feel like the foursomes are here, and it's going to be really, really interesting. I anticipate. What I expect is that we continue. We were last time at I think it was general system theory that we were talking about in Utopia or Oblivion. So I expect us to progress onto this and see how we can really, really, take those and apply to our thinking and our doing, most importantly. So should I start now with sharing my screen? And who's going to read?
I'll give it a shot, but my voice is maybe a little bit annoying.
Okay, should I read? Will you stand my accent?
Oh, are you kidding? I love your accent.
Okay. Let me share my screen here.
Girls can read too in an emergency.
Okay. So let me start here. Multiplication of craft. Wealth began, as we have noted earlier, when man stepped on the long end of a log lying across another log with his short end under another big log, and saw the big log, which was too heavy for him to lift with his muscles, lifted easily by gravity, pulling his minuscule weight against the high advantage long arm of the lever. Multiplication of industrial wealth began when man fastened a set of levers radically around the hub of a wheel under a waterfall and connected the wheel with a grinding mill. Thus he learned to stand aside from the work and gaining perspective, to use only his brain to rearrange inanimate energy patterns, external to his own integral bodily energies, to do more and more fundamental man-advantaging work. He did so by shunting energy patterns to impinge upon his machine levers. Thought and comments.
So
There's leverage, man.
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of as well. It's the power of leverage. I mean, and that's we've seen that with our Wednesday calls. What that exactly means. Doesn't necessarily have to be. My mind initially just thinks about how financial leverage works, but it works in every aspect of our lives.
Anything else?
I can't help but think about the tremendous amount of energy that comes to our planet every single day that we never harvest. And yet we're willing to kill each other over, oil in the ground, but we let the sunlight go uncaptured, and we let the gravity and the flow of rivers and tides and wind, and it's right there. We could even be sharing it, but we let certain constructs get in the way of us using the wealth that comes to us to best advantage.
Okay, but what are the fundamental concepts do you see there in the geometry?
Fulcrum, leverage fulcrum.
Yeah.
And I do like the way that he talks about the idea that in this scenario, for the first time, man is standing to the side and looking and using his mind to rearrange how.
Exactly.
That's
how things are
ephemeralization in a way,
interacting.
right?
Yeah, but
Essentially, using more with less and less. That's you're using
Yeah.
your mind and not necessarily using the actual matter.
So Joe, as a
It
distinction,
does.
as a stable datum, I would say leverage is doing more and more with less and less, but ephemeralization is doing everything with nothing. And it's really
Yeah.
getting to that moment of a complete metaphysical, because we're not using, we've taken leverage right over the edge.
Okay, to me, he used at least 6 concepts there that are fundamental. He used inside out.
Tell
He
me more about
used, yes, inside of himself, man, and outside. He uses lack and pattern. He uses brains and mind.
Mhm.
And then he uses leverage. Do you see that?
The lag and pattern and inside and outside, I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, look at what are you saying? What else are you looking for, Joe? You see, external to his own integral bodily energies. To use only his brain to rearrange inanimate energy patterns.
Okay. Okay.
External to his own internal bodily energies. And the step aside is lag, is the use of lag. If you were continuously in the flow, given the way we build, you wouldn't learn anything. You would just be in the flow.
That makes sense.
Okay. Can I continue?
Sure.
Humans found that the vast associative, gravity, matter, and dissociative radiation energy patternings of universe can be harnessed, shunted, and valved by them to impinge at preferred time and quality rates upon the long ends of levers to be led through trains of gears and electric generators and conductors and motors to do preferred work of man at infinitum. Any comment?
Okay, for me, I think I see what Joe was talking about, the ephemeralization. So it started with the levers, right? And then now we don't even have to use any energy to raise or to lift objects, because we've gone into gears and electric generators and etc. and motors. That's what I get from this.
Yeah.
So fusion would be associative.
Mhm. But to me, there are three words that can be very, very interesting: harnessed, shunt, and valve.
Involved.
Mm.
That is all applications.
Yes.
Yeah, the first harness that you think of is the harnessing of your horse, right?
Mhm.
Shunting. Shunting is to change, to deviate the normal flow into some other flow. And valves for controls.
Okay. Still not totally clear on what he's trying to say here, though.
Well, man learn by experience and thinking and associating to harness energy. For example, if you build if there is, how will I say it? The word is, you know, if you build a dam, that is to harness energy, isn't it?
Hmm.
And if you flow that water through a turbine, you are shunting energy, aren't you?
Yes.
If you let that energy fall on a turbine, go through a turbine and turn a turbine and produce energy, electrical energy, you have valved the energy into being used in a form that is preferred to you, right?
Correct.
Okay. And when they say ad infinitum, I think about, you know, you can devise, you know, it's just your mind that will be the limitation, but you can devise, you can divide and multiply in infinite ways to use. That's what we've ever been doing in terms of applications, knowledge and application. Any other thought?
Not at this moment, no.
Okay. Man is now learning through the repeated lessons of experimental science that wealth is explicitly the organized tool articulated energy capability to sustain his forward hours and days of metabolic regeneration, to physically protect him, to increase his knowledge and degrees of freedom while decreasing his inter frustrations. Whoa.
Mm.
Should I read this? Sir?
What does
What's
that
that?
even mean?
Inner
So-
frustrations. Yeah.
When
I mean,
you were hanging out with Kiyosaki, he would talk about the idea of kind of getting an assessment of your own wealth. Was if you stopped working today, how long could you survive and at what level, based on the work that you've already done and the processes you've already set into motion.
That's interesting.
This is where it's from, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'm toast.
And I like
Yeah.
the word
Mm.
repeated lessons of experimental science.
I like
Yes.
inter frustrations.
Yes.
Yes.
But inter-frustration is another word for friction, to reduce friction. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think decreasing our inner frustrations isn't as easy as Bucky's making it out to be, but it makes sense what he's saying.
No, it's
And
truly.
it is, we are experimenting, I mean, continuously, right? It's just a question if we're taking that feedback and actually, I don't know, focusing that energy into, or reorganizing it so that we can actually get rid of our frustrations. I think about that all the time when I'm looking back at my life.
Yeah, but he's not talking about our frustration. He's talking about inter-frustration. When you say inter, is between two things. So in the gearing of elements of the system and the leveraging of element of the system, you reduce the frictions, the losses. And that's what ephemeralization is. We can't create energy. That is fundamental to our system of thought. But we can use it in infinite manners, minimizing the losses. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. But I really like his definition of welfare.
Yeah.
Okay. Wealth, he finds, is inherently regenerative. But because of comprehensive system synergies, the rate of regeneration of man's solo wealth is to his commonwealth generation rate only as X is to X4. As experimentally demonstrated, wealth is energy compounded with intellect know-how. Comment?
I do think wealth is regenerative. I think sometimes we look at it as finite, and that's problematic sometimes. I think that's creates an artificial demand. But I think, yes, true wealth is regenerative and actually is something that is self-sustaining. If that makes sense. And the interesting thing is the comprehensive synergies, the rate of regeneration of man's solo wealth is to his commonwealth regeneration rate only as X to X4, X to the fourth. That is a little unclear to me. When he says man's solo wealth.
So I would think of this talking about the role, the wealth of an individual.
That's what I was thinking about. Yeah.
As opposed to looking, when you say commonwealth, I start to think about us as caretakers of the biosphere, of the position that humanity as a whole is put in. And because no matter, if you take your scheme, when he talks about the gears and levers, you're using the energy that's there as part of the commonwealth. No one man owns the river from start to finish. It belongs in some manner, in some way. It's part of a greater cosmic whole that's part of the biosphere richness.
I have a suggestion on this one as well. I think maybe he's referring to the fact that if you generate a person on his own generating wealth, it is much slower than if we come together to create common wealth. The regeneration rate then is exponential x to the power of 4, as opposed to if you do it on your own, which is at x. Okay, I'm trying my math and science here from the language perspective, you know.
But look at it. Look at it.
Hmm.
We are in universe, right? We are 4 here. We form a minimum system. And the minimum system is the 4, and the interaction of those is a 2 by 2.
Around in between.
Yeah, the tetrahedron, you keep on. So is the
Hmm.
2 is to the power of 4. You can see in 4 ways, 4 windows. So the dimension, the minimum dimension is 4. Do you understand that an extra division is a multiplication? If you have one-dimensional problem, if it becomes 2-dimensional, is multiplied, is a square. If it becomes 3-dimensional, is a cube. If it's 4-dimensional, it's to the power of 4. Does it make sense?
Mhm.
Yes.
All right, that's what he's saying here. And we know that the minimum system of our interaction is always
2.
4.
Oh,
No, it's
those.
4.
Oh.
Yes. It's 2 by 2.
Oh, and that's the between and around.
Yeah. Because a vector is 2. Okay. Can I continue here?
Yes.
Stance's law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. The first constituent of wealth, energy, is therefore irreducible. Stance states that the entire physical universe is energy. E equal mc squared. Some of, I guess here, the energy is operative in associative patterns as matter. The associative energy as matter is organized in leverage systems to do work. The other energy patterns dissociatively as radiation, which is transformed into free energy to be directed to impinge the levers. Every time mind uses the second constitution of, no, let me just stop here. Any comment? Okay,
No.
all right. So every time mind uses the second constituent of energy is know-how. So the first constituent of energy, of wealth, is energy. The second constituent of wealth is know-how. This intellectual resource automatically increases. He learns more. Learning is only growthful. It is impossible to learn less. Energy cannot decrease. Know-how can only increase. Whoa.
Oh,
Mhm.
can know-how only increase?
Yes. How can know-how decrease?
I'm trying to think of a scenario.
I think when we look back at the process of man, there is the theory that with cataclysmic events, there has been enough psychic trauma, enough loss of elders that in different epochs, we have lost knowledge. But I would say as a general rule, in one lifetime, you can't unknow something. You don't unlearn it.
But isn't unlearning, and that's what I was actually trying to think about, sometimes unlearning, but that's increasing your know-how.
Yeah.
No,
So-
unlearning is set as setting aside. It's putting on the back burner.
Unlearning is setting aside.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I like that.
But unlearning between quotes is not set aside set aside is the real thing. But what we call unlearning is actually taking something and putting aside for no use now.
It's like pollution
Yes.
in a way. It's the same concept because, you know, pollution is what's left over, but you're
Mhm.
setting it aside, and it's kind of the same thing.
So is
Yeah.
profit.
So is profit.
So when we get really insightful, we can take what somebody thinks is pollution and turn it into profit.
That's right. That's where you find your market niche. And even then, I would argue that the more profit you have, the more pollution, the more likely, the more risk there is to yourself. Because that means that you're leaving a lot of ideas on the table. And you don't necessarily have a vision of the future. I just think I see that all the time with companies many times, is that they, you know, they have good profit margins, but then they don't necessarily, they grow through acquisition versus actually grow through organic growth, which is actually thinking about what's next. That's just my thought. I mean, that's we're a little bit off the topic,
But you use the word there. You leave nothing on the table. Maybe you're just prisoner of the face of a table or top of a table. You don't see your under table, you don't see your around table.
that's right. Yes, you're
Okay.
only looking you're only
Yeah.
looking at 1 or 2D actually.
But this is kind of beautiful. It's, you know, I get stuck because there's certainly plenty of people saying forever have always talked about, quote, doomsday solutions, how everything that's happening is unsustainable. And yet in my lifetime, the economy has grown. The ingenuity of what men can, you know, of what humans can do has continued to increase. And I could look at it very cynically and say, well, it all has to explode. It all has to come to some screeching end. Or I could take the stance that we are in a progressive cycle of creation. And even though things might not look much, you know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, they might not look so much like today.
Mhm.
I think that if we continue on this planet, the path to utopia is still an upward spiral. That we will continue to increase in actual regenerative wealth. And I think when we cross that boundary of, you know, it has to be regenerative or the wealth will diminish itself.
Mhm.
I think it's possible.
Yeah,
do
Susan,
too.
Susan, I absolutely love what you just said. And you're right. The observation, we look around, people keep telling us that there isn't enough, we got to be careful, but every time we've just stepped above and beyond, you know, and created more, literally out of nothing in most cases, you know. So, and so you know, we have people create wealth and create jobs and create lots and opportunities. I love that they come from this space of abundance rather than the scarcity, you know. And I see the abundance is holding true in so many aspects of our lives, and it's the scarcity that makes people fight and you know, and hoard, and you know, it's mine versus yours. So I absolutely love what you just said.
Excellent. So what do you have to say about the associative energy as matter is organized in leverage systems to do work, and the dissociative energy as radiation impinges on the levels?
So I would say
Alright.
they're always in equilibrium
Mhm.
because energy is never created or destroyed. So there's always a certain amount of the energy that's present as matter, physical, and there's always a certain amount of the energy that's lurking around as metaphysical. And it's interesting because some of the energy pieces, as he's talking, when he says radiation, I think about solar radiation, I think about nuclear fission, but then how I also think that us as individuals, us as manifestations of matter, that each one of us walks around every single day radiating love, enthusiasm, optimism, and actually putting the energy of our own life force to the endeavors that we think are most important. So I think that possibly humans show up as this combination of both matter and radiative energy.
But look at it also, look at this aspect too. The leverage increases, right? The effect. Radiation back impinges. What does it mean? It's negative, is moderating the system.
It causes friction at the boundary where between physical and metaphysical. And that
Yes.
friction is not, when it says impinges, it just gives that moment to transfer the energy into a force. That energy is just energy until it comes up to a boundary. And with that friction, it imparts force.
Yeah. But in the sense that without it, the pattern wouldn't be maintained, right?
Correct. Yeah.
The pattern, which is the matter, will not be maintained. You really need that to come back or to do whatever it is to maintain the pattern that you are using. So otherwise, matter will completely dissociate and become free energy. And all will kind of be, it will be oblivion, if you want. Are you seeing what I'm meaning here?
I think I get this very bright line of that impingement at that event horizon of those things coming together and having friction and helping reinforce the boundaries.
Yes. So again, they have a duality here, the plus and the minus. Expansion
And contraction.
and then keeping, contracting. It's always, Bucky is always talking in those terms.
Tensegrity.
Yes. It is therefore scientifically clear that wealth, which combines energy and intellect, can only increase. And that wealth can increase only by use. And that wealth increases as fast as it is used. The faster, the more. Those are the facts of science. Those are the facts of life.
And there's the reason to be hopeful for utopia rather than doomed to oblivion.
Susan, you're
Yeah.
thoughtful.
Pardon?
I say you are very thoughtful there. And what do you
Yes.
say? Yes.
Yeah. For me, I'm always very hopeful, optimistic, and but realistic.
Yeah. But he's saying that those are facts
Think
of science.
Mm.
Don't ask Dr. Fauci.
Okay. We have found that we have found one, that the metaphysical balances the physical. 2, that the metaphysical universe embraces the physical.
Mm.
Both being infinite, but the metaphysical being always 1 tetrahedron greater than the physical. 3, that the metaphysical generalized capture and identification of the physical is an irreversible condition. E.g., Einstein as intellect, metaphysical, writing the identification of the physical universe, E equal mc squared, is irreversible. For the physical, which is disorderly, cannot think and make orderly statements. Energy cannot write what Einstein intellect is. Therefore, we can say that the metaphysical is greater than and concentrates and coheres the physical. Wow. Steve has to be here for this, right?
Yeah, this would be Steve, right up Steve's.
That is his full stop.
This is it. Everything is about the metaphysical with Steve. So,
But I like the word here, you know, like metaphysical minus physical equal 1 tetrahedron. It reminds you of the bow tie of Kelly.
the what? Oh, the bow tie.
Yeah,
Yeah. What if?
the concave tetrahedron, the convex tetrahedron, and the 0 point. And Bucky said the 0 cannot be physical. It's conceptually metaphysical. Therefore, the metaphysical being that 0 point plus the convex, it means that metaphysical is 1 tetrahedron ahead of the physical, but it embraces the physical. The two always inter-embrace.
That's an interesting point.
Very
No pun
poetic.
intended. That 0 point is metaphysical.
Absolutely.
I have not thought of it from that perspective. I mean, we always think of this, what 0 really means, and you know, but it is metaphysical in nature. And that's a different way for me to think of it. That's definitely going to be one of my takeaways.
I say that's how I experience it. And I've always, that's how I experience it, is as a metaphysical moment, as metaphysical concept. I had thought of it as an event horizon where they're both coming together at a boundary. But I think in order to walk through, not to just appreciate it, but to walk through it, you have to get metaphysical. And that's where so many of the people in my life who I can love as friends, they're not interested in that. They do not want to lean forward with apprehension into the metaphysical side of what's going on. And so far, I'm lucky that so many of them will still allow me to be in their midst, even though they think I'm a nut and a, granola flake or whatever.
Really?
Oh,
Why would they think?
because I'm always interested in seeing what's the metaphysical surrounding construct, and letting that light and that intuition and that energy run through what I'm experiencing in the right here and right now.
What you just shared is baffling because you speak with so much sense. I don't get it.
If you don't believe in metaphysical, it makes no sense at all.
Right.
And a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
A lot of people, even very smart people, don't believe in the metaphysical.
And that's okay, but man, would that be a limited trip on this, in this incarnation.
So you don't look at, just out of curiosity, you don't look at it as a boundary, 0?
I do. I look at it as an
yeah.
event horizon. So the two boundaries approaching each other, and Emanu this is maybe the first time that I had thought of the physical being the concave, being that universe that we're in, and the metaphysical being the convex. And I thought of them as being more equivalent. But this whole thing about them nesting and having the physical within the greater tetrahedron of the metaphysical actually is much more appealing and makes more sense to me.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Both are infinite, but
Which-
we know the difference between them is finite.
So that one sounded contradictory, because I always thought Bucky would have demanded that physical is finite, because universe is finite, and universe includes more than the physical.
Yeah, but look at what he's saying here. Universe is know-how, right? Is what you know.
So that's metaphysical.
Yeah, and universe is always expanding, because the way you know are always accumulating. Knowledge is always increasing.
Right.
It's infinitely increasing. It's finite, infinitely increasing.
If you'd given me a multiple choice test that said Buckminster Fuller says that the physical is finite or infinite, I would have said that it's finite with infinite fractals within it, infinite microfractals being possible.
Okay. Energy is finite, right? Let's just put it like this way. Because you cannot invent. Energy is conserved. That's what it is. But can energy write the equation?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
That energy
Would it-
equal m squared, mc squared.
No, I mean,
So
according
it
to
got
this.
written by something outside of energy, isn't it?
I would have
Think
thought,
about it that way.
Well,
yeah, I would have thought about intellect being in some way an expression of energy. But
But can't energy be also infinite? Because the solar energy is infinite, hydro energy is infinite. So can it also not
Is
be
it?
infinite?
Is it infinite?
No,
mean-
the physical is infinite.
The physical is infinite?
Yes, energy is finite. It is written there, both being infinite, talking about the metaphysical universe embraces the physical, both being infinite. Do you see that?
Okay, I'm lost.
I'm still going to have to hang out with that statement. I'm not disagreeing with it, but that is a new perspective to me.
I like how you said that. I'm gonna have to hang out with that statement because that's exactly how I feel.
But let's ponder
That is a
again.
great line.
Let's spend 3 minutes on it. Let's spend 3 minutes.
Okay.
You're putting a boundary on how quick my mind can work.
It's gonna take more than 3 minutes for me, but anyway, that's a
If physical is the arrangement, identification, and arrangement of patterns, which is our knowledge. How many ways can you rearrange your patterns?
mm,
There's an exponential calculation.
Yeah, but how many? Is it finite?
no.
Yeah.
Or is it?
Oh, no. That's why we've not yet reached veritas. We always pursue veritas.
I'm gonna say it's really hard to calculate, Manu, but you being much better at math than I am, there's a factorial equation that will run through the possible number of variations.
But it's ever increasing. That's the principle. What has it for our experience as humans, our accumulated experience, has it ever increased? Has it ever decreased?
Hmm.
No.
So on the basis of what can we quantify that it is finite? I'm talking about the patterns.
Okay. I guess I thought of it as a theoretical limit, but that if you were in the mind of God, there would be some appreciation for what that number of combinations could be.
Okay, but let's go back to something again, all right? To a concept that is always a duality, boundary, space.
Yeah.
The boundary close, right? Encloses the space, defining our finite. But can you talk of boundary without the space?
No.
So, but no.
Okay, now it's qualifying what the space is. You say in space is not just an anamorphic, contain.
Okay.
It is the way you divide and the way you imagine putting those things together to make sense to you.
So there's an
That you
infinite.
accumulate an experience. And that way is infinite.
Yeah. Okay.
But since universe is boundary multiplied by space, finite multiplied by infinite is what? Hello?
Infinite.
Infinite.
Yes. Volume is area multiplied by the radius.
Huh.
Okay. Are we intellectually satisfied?
Stimulated.
I'm gonna hang with what you said, but I'm gonna need to sleep on it probably till Wednesday, at least.
I'm glad
When
it
you
was
say
recorded.
universe is finite, you're talking about the boundary of our knowledge,
Right.
right? At this point,
Right.
we know a certain thing, but it's always evolving because the divisions of it and the patterning are always increasing. That's why it says 3 here, that the metaphysical generalize capture and identification of the physical. Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So you will never ever have physical without the metaphysical,
No.
but you could have metaphysical without the physical.
Yeah.
No.
I just wouldn't be able to experience it as an incarnate being because the price of being incarnate is being physical.
Can you say that again as to why it can be metaphysical without being physical?
Kind of like space is infinite.
Okay. Oh, if there's no boundary. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
And so there's metaphysical, which captures and cradles the physical.
So it
I
says,
mean, something outside of physical.
okay. So wealth is therefore inherently irreversible. Wealth can only gain as in our proposition. QED, therefore demonstrated.
That is hopeful.
Okay.
All right. Can we evolve? Maybe
I think
we
so.
still have, okay. we can still spend another 40 minutes on the
Design
Design
science. Yeah.
I'm amazed how far all of you have come from when we started with the design discipline, you know. I've missed quite a bit. Okay, I'm going to check back on the videos.
Okay, excellent.
Cool.
Oh, Anne, you're there. You're out living it in different ways.
Yeah, we're just starting design science now.
Mm.
Design science. Angle and frequency modulation of directions and sequence rates of least resistant event development. Selection of progressive 1 out of 12 alternately equal least resistance directions, i.e. the 12 fundamentals degrees of freedom of intertransformative transactions in physical universe.
We're gonna have
Wow.
to yeah, we're gonna have to break that down.
Yeah. Yes, let's apply Steve's methods here, because otherwise we'll be lost.
So angle and frequency modulation of directions and sequence rates.
Yes. But let's start with angle.
Okay.
What is an angle?
It's a relationship of two vectors.
What do you say, Susan?
And it's a relationship of two vectors.
An angle is how two vectors are apart, yes. Is a measure, in my opinion, is a measure of how two vectors are apart. An angle is also a measure of the degree of veering
Right. Yes.
of a system.
Degree of what?
Veering.
Okay.
I'm just saying, I'm not saying that, but that's the way I feel an angle is. But there are two things. It talks about angle and it talks about frequency. What is frequency?
It's rate of change,
Mhm.
rate of oscillation. So it brings in the idea of
Time.
time and timing and sequence and lag.
Right.
Exactly. But can you say the frequency is a count of something within a certain lag?
Absolutely.
Any more?
And it could happen in as little as 2 dimensions, but it could happen in many more.
It's interesting because I just looked up frequency. And it says it also occasionally referred to as a temporal frequency to emphasize the contrast to spatial frequency. An ordinary frequency to emphasize the contrast between to angular frequency. So angular frequency is specific then.
Let me reformulate my frequency visual. It's a count of occurrences of some event during a given lag. Does it make sense? I just try to rewrite it. I say angle is a measure of how apart are two vectors or the degree of veering of a system. Frequency is the count of occurrences of some event during a given lag. Maybe I'm confusing more, but
No, I mean, that makes sense. You're integrating time into this.
yeah. But I'm not yet talking about time because that will introduce another. I just want to use what we know.
Well, if you say lag, aren't you introducing time?
No, not necessarily lag. Lag is a weight.
Okay.
But I would agree with Joe. I think lag introduces time, but frequency introduces time. It is a measurement of occurrences over some unit of time.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the definition of angular frequency is actually kind of confusing in and of itself to me. That I'm looking at.
Angular frequency?
Yeah, I can look this up. I can put this in the chat.
But one loop is an angle, isn't it?
That's right.
Okay, so when you're talking about time, like in seconds, you're talking about loops.
Well, right, and then you would have,
You're talking about loops of 360 degrees on a plane,
Mhm.
on 2 dimensions.
On 2 dimensions.
Yes,
Mhm.
that's the representation that we make. Any other? This is really his definition, eh?
yeah, this is a lot to take in.
What is modulation? We're trying to break down. We say angle, we discuss frequency. What is modulation? Joe, can you look up, please?
Sure. An inflection of the tone of a pitch of a hang on. In science, it's the process of converting data into radio waves by adding information to an electronic or optical carrier signal. This goes back to what we were talking about with FM and AM, right? Essentially what we have talked about in the past.
And so frequency modulation and amplitude modulation.
Yes, and as those as models, we've talked about that extensively here in the past, over the past 2 years. I don't have the actually, maybe I can find them really quickly. I don't have the handouts.
Yeah. And I would have said, if you just asked me modulation, I would have said affecting change. I would not have necessarily gone to encoding it on a wave, but that's a very specific definition of modulation.
So I did find it actually, what we were talking about before and how we broke this down into signal and noise and amplitude modulation, and which is the breadth of the range measuring a movement. And then frequency modulation happening often regular and short intervals, tuning in and tuning out is kind of what comes into this. Does that make sense?
But apart here, Joe, I'm looking at the dictionary. What is to modulate? Instead of looking at modulation, he say to exert a modifying or controlling influence on the state, on something. Example, the state attempt to modulate private business cash flow.
Right.
So he exacting a modifying, controlling influence. And that leads me back to what we talk about valves somewhere, valving.
Yes.
So that definition, maybe Joe, can you put it on the chat to modulate?
I have, yeah, I mean, I can look it up. quick on.
Okay, also the second is a vary the strength, tone, or pitch of one's voice.
I don't have the same one that you have, the one I'm coming up with, but
Have you put it here, Joe, in the chat? Just try to.
I'll put it here in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. Just I think it will help. All right. So you have to do something controlling, modulating to vary, but from externally to apply, like if you apply a choke, you're modulating something. If there is a flow and you choke it with a valve, you are modulating that flow. Right?
Mhm.
Or your valve at home, in your kitchen, your tap. What does your tap do? It modulates the flow of water to the patterns or the frequency of flow that you use, that are useful to you. Does it make sense?
Yes, that does make sense, actually. That goes back to tuning in and tuning out.
Yeah.
So that part is clear to me.
Okay. So let's go to the second if it is clear, let's go to the second part of the definition here. Selections of progressive 1 out of 12 alternately equal least resistant direction, i.e. 12 fundamental degrees of freedom of intertransformative transactions in physical universe. Beautiful. Degree of freedom with minimum friction, least resistant directions. Energy flows. Energy always flows to the line of minimum
Resistance.
resistance. Right?
Right.
And in some other session, we'll talk about the 12 degrees of freedom.
That's right.
You
We
remember
did.
those? Yes. So he's putting in what design science is here. Is selections of progressive 1 out of 12 alternately equal least resistant direction, the 12 fundamental degrees of freedom of intertransformative transaction in physical universe. Can we progress now?
Yeah, though that you just cleared it up for me, that what we're sometimes we get lost in the words and we forget what we're actually talking about. And by you saying that this is design science, this all actually starts to make more sense. This is how we design, essentially anything. How we tune in and tune out, or and all these terms start to make a lot more sense. These are models.
Yes.
I will tell you though, in any given moment, I'd have a hard time telling you, identifying all 12 degrees of freedom.
Yeah, me
You want
too.
to identify the 12 degrees of freedom?
I would do well, like it was a challenge when it was 6, but
Yeah.
now that it's 12. I believe they're there.
No, they're there. He said it. 1 is spinning. Second is orbiting. We are in the concave part of it. Spinning, orbiting, in, out, torsion,
Is this Soviet that you're saying? Velocity is spin, orbit.
No, I said you have 6 degrees of freedom in the physical part. 6 degrees. In the physical, you have spinning, that's 1. Orbiting
Right.
is 2. 3 is
Velocity.
no,
Velocity.
no, no. Inside out. Inside out. What he calls pucking. 4 is evolving. 5th is torsion. And 6 is precession. Spinning, orbiting, involuting, pucking like kissing inside out, torsion, and precession. Now, if you have that, and you know that there is convex, there is concave and convex, and the convex being at minimum a tetrahedron, there's also 6 that are negative. So you have a 6 positive and 6 negative. That is 12. Where we get ourselves imprisoned intellectually is to try to put the 12 degrees of freedom in only the physical universe.
Mm.
Right? I can't hear you, and you are mute.
Okay. Manu, you're saying that these are the 6 physical degrees of freedom, right?
Yes.
So you have the non-physical one. What would they be?
Well, everything is always in 2.
Right.
So you have positive, you have negative.
Right. I
Remember
see.
that when they talk about the lever, you say you have associative energy and dissociative. And what did dissociative do? Dissociative, what was the word, Susan? And what was the word?
Radiative.
Impinge.
Gravitational and radiative.
Impinges your expanding physical. So you need the 2 for it to exist.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we continue?
Sure.
Okay. My concept 8, then isolate the objective and subjective design science activities relating to the total evolutionary events of man in universe. As for instance, in 1969, the new generation of 700 passenger, 125-ton cargo aeroplanes will be able to fly non-stop across the Pacific Ocean to establish approximately tenfold the present aeronautical transport capability within 2 years after the regular operations begin. Such event must be comprehensively integrated with all other vastly accelerating environmental relationship transformation. Mining the moon will by this time become a challenging consideration. Hey, there are people who are thinking about going to the moon to mine today.
Yeah,
right?
now there's a lot of people that think that now. But I am interested about how he keeps using the airlines as a metaphor. And his predictions. Yeah, I mean,
remember, Bucky is writing this in the 60s. What happened in the 60s?
No, it's. I mean, they're just starting.
No, the jumbo jet started.
That's
the 747. When was it?
That's what I'm trying.
Oh, look at when was the Boeing 747 introduced? With the DC-8 and DC-10. You remember those planes? They were Tupolev, the Russian thing, and the American.
1969.
Yes. You get it?
Yeah, so he was about 10 years out.
Yeah, no. That's the time when Bucky is writing these things in the 60s. So he's saying, what he's saying is that capability of a pan-ocean transformation is going to actually accelerate already the rate of acceleration of change that was occurring by, say, for example, the trade between the west coast of the US and Japan and China and all this, and the East, for example.
Yeah, and just the ability for people to travel.
Yes,
More.
and to change.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
And it comes back to another thing that Bucky has said. He said, that these principles that we're walking or that we're going through right now have helped him in predicting what the future would actually look like.
Yes.
And then this is where he's starting to say that we can design the future that we want based on this is what we're actually putting together.
Yes. With the help of a computer, we can store more, we can retrieve faster.
I think he overestimated the use of the capabilities of a computer, though. So
No.
it can't
What
be
we
perfect.
So far.
Yeah. So
He didn't foresee Pornhub. Or cat videos on
videos, yeah. There's an example of learning like unknowing.
Yep.
Yeah. But he's saying that basically what you are, the feedback loops are accelerating. And as a consequence, if I have one feedback loop, it's going to accelerate exponentially. It's not accelerating the system in a way that is just in one direction. It's accelerating at least tenfold, as he said, because it goes all over.
It's not linear, it's spherical.
Yes. I mean, we'll be seeing it. I mean, internet. People can imagine. I've seen the internet. I was one of the first we were one of the first users of internet. Really, internet got introduced and commercially. No, not the internet, even the email. Public got introduced to us in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, I remember the first time I was really online was 1994.
Okay.
From home.
Now, Joe, I don't know how old you are, but compare it
I'm
to
80.
to 5-10 generations before, somebody who saw the steam train.
Right.
How long did it take him to see the next big change? A long time. You are now in the universe of big data stuff and just accelerating in very, very short. So it's compressing the change, and it is growing just exponentially. The number of changes arrive, the sequence of changes arriving is just mind-boggling. Right?
That's right.
Is it enough? We still have about 13 minutes to go. And then I
Sure.
think we'll start to digest it. Okay, can I continue here?
Sure.
The rental service industry to be discussed in concept 9 must be compounded with time designing, doubling, and possibly tripling the environmental control capabilities. All-around traveling men greatly accelerate the experience of seasonal changing between winter and summer. The regularity of days and night will be almost obliterated by the ability to fly around the earth at the rate of its turning. He will want, however, to sleep for 8 hours, even 24 hours, independent of sunlight or shadow. This may often force him to use the hotel bedroom 1 hour after it has been vacated by others. A good standard hotel bedroom and all its equipment should be indistinguishable from brand new. Hotel room may be occupied successively by 2 or 3 different women, each 24 hours. Just as airport gates are progressively occupied by aeroplanes, which receive their rehabilitating services and move on to be immediately replaced by another plane. This concept of man on Earth is to be spoken out as frequency modulated environment occupancies. Wow.
I still need to sleep at night. I don't know. You can sleep during the day if you have to, but I'd prefer to sleep in the evenings.
But I'm more intrigued by the first sentence.
Yeah,
Yes.
the
The
rental industry.
rental service industry
Yeah,
must be compounded with time designing, doubling, and possibly tripling the environmental control capability. Right obligations.
time designing.
Yes.
And he goes into that. That's a very interesting concept about how
Yeah.
things are actually being used with only within an hour of one another, with individuals actually going in and out, and how that increases the number of interactions that we have with each other. It's almost like an assembly line, to be quite honest.
It's more like gears on a machine.
Hmm.
That they're meshing.
Can you explain that a little more for me, please?
So assembly line to me seems linear,
Right.
where so gears in a watch, they come together, they impinge on one another, they cause,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
and they circle back and they do it again, and they do it again. So the same hotel room that in years past was only used once per day could potentially be used 2 or 3 times per day because man is traveling ever faster, I think is what he's getting at. And so as we tune to the frequency of how we're using things and we start to use them to their most optimal, we add to the acceleration.
Mm-hmm. You know, in New York, 20 years ago, even 25 years ago, there were AM and PM renters of the same apartment. There were people who were working at night, other people were working at day. So the people who work at night, they come, they occupy the space during day. And by the time they leave later, the person who was working during day comes in and occupy by night.
Huh.
Now, I don't know the quality of it, but it existed. I've seen that.
I'm sure the quality couldn't have been there, but still, that's interesting. I never really
So,
heard of
but
that.
another concept here that is very, very important is that everybody will become actually, it will be a nation of renters, a world of renters. Because there's no, in this world, there is no need for ownership.
Not ready to give up that concept quite so easily.
Right.
But that tie to what he said is that you always have to have energy. If you store energy, it becomes something else. It's not going to be useful to you. Just store it, right? Let me not bugger your man further.
I'll think about it, but somebody still has to control it. Somebody has to maintain it. Somebody has to make decisions.
And that's why I say the rental service industry. must be compounded with time, design, doubling, and possibly tripling of the environment control capabilities. The environment control capabilities. So everything has to be, is done, it has to be accountable in my understanding of this. Maybe I'm wrong completely.
I don't think you're wrong, but I'm not sure either.
I don't think this paragraph is saying that you can't have ownership or that you could. This is talking about an industry. And
No, I'm not saying that you can't have. I'm just saying ownership has a tendency in such of ephemeralized world to become redundant.
somebody's going to own it. Somebody's going to control it.
So
Right.
that type one evolution, Susan. To your words.
Yeah, no, I'm someone, something, some organization. There's a whole lot of responsibility to go a whole lot of need for people to respond.
Yeah. But remember, it's Utopia. Right?
Okay.
It's tending towards Utopia. I don't know if Utopia can be achieved. All right. Anything further? Or do we stop here?
I think
Or do
that's
we-
interesting.
Huh?
I think we have time to keep going.
Okay.
I mean, that was an
Is it-
interesting paragraph. It was actually oddly clear.
So you say this concept of man on earth is to be spoken about as frequency modulated environment occupancies.
That makes sense. It actually flows. The past two paragraphs actually make sense. I mean, I don't mean it's somewhat clear to me. I don't know if that's a problem for me, but I don't know if that's a good or bad sign that I'm starting to really clearly, if I start to see Bucky's words clearly. We can keep going. I'm clear with this. The concept of man on earth is to be spoken about frequency and modulated makes sense when he's talking about how travel works, how housing works, how all these things work together.
But do you see that is evolving towards teleology here?
Purpose. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
That is also talking about accountability fully?
Accountability and then
Your action, frequency modulation, frequency modulated environment occupancies. You have to do it in a way that is accountable, that you account for it.
a cosmic accounting.
Yes. And that's why
Yes,
I'm
that
linking
part
it to
makes
the
sense.
beginning of the paragraph. You see here, it talks about doubling or possibly tripling of the environment control capabilities.
Which,
Right?
well, actually, let's come back to that line, doubling and possibly tripling the environment control capabilities.
Yes.
Control capabilities.
Yes.
What does he mean by that? Is he saying
Okay.
to me
Okay. Let's
multiple
say you're going
levels
to
of control?
use, let's say you're going to use fusion
Okay.
for energy, whatever. Are we capable of controlling what can happen?
Not yet.
No.
We're not yet even capable of the fission, controlling fission. right?
Correct.
So if a fireball of fusion start, will we be able to control it?
So
It'll
what
be a
is he saying about ownership in this then?
He talk about the Commonwealth. What does Commonwealth?
That's what I was
Actually,
thinking
really-
about. Like, so even who owns these things, right?
No, he's saying what Utopia is to use the resources, to harness and put to use the resources of this planet Earth of ours to the benefit of every human, and to the respect of other occupants. We are co-occupant of this spaceship. That's what it means. Remember his first sentence is many on his book. In I don't know when he was 26 years old and wanted to commit suicide. Then let's just talk in the biblical time. A voice came to him and he said, what can one man do to affect, let's call it the well-being of all people of the world? And that's how he dedicated his life. He found his life purpose was to find the truth and to apply things that of the truth to improve our conditions. That's why he so much traveled the world.
Mhm. Actually, I remember reading his daughter's, I think, obituary that she had written about how he was always gone and on the road.
So when we have power, let's just say I happen to be concentrated, to have power concentrated in my hands, in me. I've got to have 2 to 3 times the capability of handling it. Handling its variance, the consequences of it. If not, I have to make provision for it.
I'm also trying to link this with some other stuff he's written in the past too, even Spaceship Earth. But anyway.
Okay, anyway, we are there. I think that is a mouthful. So we shall start preparing for the landing of this plane.
No
So,
pun intended.
okay, let me stop sharing. So good. Anne, how do you feel? What do you take away?
Okay, actually, I'm quite excited to see what the next few paragraphs are like. So I was just hesitant to say anything because I have a feeling we're going to go on a whole lot longer than that. But the whole idea of wealth, I is something that at the gut level, I've always felt that it isn't exactly the way people say it, and here to see how Bucky has put it, it fits right in with the observations I have of what has been going on. Maybe let's not go back too far, like even over the past 200-300 years, because one of the things that I try to work with my students and my teachers as well, because we're looking at the cost of housing, the cost of purchasing, owning homes, and so on. And every generation, we hear the same thing, because way back when I was, starting out to work, I've always felt that, how am I ever going to afford a home, right, of my own? And today, 2 generations later, we still hear the same thing. But then I look back 5-6 generations ago, I'll bet you they said the same thing. And you
Mhm.
know, so the thing is, we think that we can't afford, but you know, time comes around and you know, we still are able to afford a home, and not a small one, a really nice one as well. So it got me thinking as to how exactly then does the world of money, ownership, and all that work, right? And I had to tell people, look, over the past 200-300 years, property prices have not gone down. They've always gone up. And yet we're able to afford it. So that's something to look at. And so the whole idea of wealth here sits really, really well with me. Okay. And we'll work out the design discipline number 8 as we go along. That's what I'm taking away. And Joe, how do you feel and what is your takeaway?
I feel very good. I mean, I really enjoyed tonight's session. And I really was kind of really blown away by actually one of the things that Susan said about assembly lines not being linear, and then how the example of using a watch was very, very helpful for me. Looking at the number 0 a little bit differently than I had when I first come in as well. I'm looking at more of it as a metaphysical, from a metaphysical perspective, and a boundary. And, you know, I've always thought about it, does 0 exist, or something along those lines from those philosophical types of discussions. But I think looking at it from a boundary is much, much easier. I also appreciate that, again, this is becoming a little bit more clear, and I'm starting to see some trends in what Bucky has written, not only the stuff that we've talked about with AM and FM modulate as, you know, modalities, or even, you know, some of the things that he's written with Spaceship Earth, how they actually fit into this. And he talks about ownership in that as well, or he talks about the great pirates that actually, you know, basically steal from the system in one way or the other. And you can kind of see that this is where he's kind of going with this. So it's an interesting concept that I'm seeing his writings actually come together. Most importantly was, you know, that thinking about this from a design perspective, I'm starting to, little by little, you start to see clearly where he's laying out how we can get to utopia. And he's providing us with actually some very good examples, whether it be with the airline industry, or just how to think about housing, or how to think about time, how to it's integrating all these concepts. It's still a lot. It was a humbling session, because you kind of, as much as I started to get some clarity on some things, I realized how far I have to go. So in starting to really understand Bucky, I started to gain clarity, and I'm thinking, wow, his concepts really are, he has a vision on how these things are all interrelated that we discuss, all these physics topics, all these other models that we talked about in the past, all his other writings, Utopian and Oblivion, Spaceship Earth, or cosmography. So you kind of start to see where all these fit in together. So that's what I'm taking away from today, is a little bit better of understanding of energy as well, and leverage, which I always appreciate, because that's a very practical thing for me. But what I'm really taking away is just how far I have to go in my journey, and how lucky I've been to have you guys along this far. So with that, I'll turn to Susan, my dear friend Susan. It's great to see her smile. It really is. It's wonderful. How are you feeling? What are you taking away from today?
I'm feeling very grateful for the optimism coming from the chance to get to explore with all of you, and also that Bucky is laying out wealth as a vector in an ever increasing direction. And so sometimes I definitely get concerned about some of the ways that I see society working globally and these attempts at trying to sequester wealth in any one direction, and sometimes seeing the whole path to oblivion laid out in such great detail. And not so many places do you get to hear individuals coming together with their intellect to build utopia. And so I really appreciate, and I've got written here, wealth is energy compounded with intellect know-how. And so the time spent studying is meant to increase my know-how. And I get that so much from gracious sharing that each one of you does. So I'm super grateful. Manu, how are you feeling and what are you taking away?
I'm really feeling good. And really, I'm grateful and appreciative of our contributions. And also thoughtful of those who are not here today. And I really hope they're going to enjoy watching the recording and adding to it in post chat. Let's just call them post chat. But what I come out of it, I come away with here is quite just verbatim, quite strong things. Is the notion of commonwealth wealth. Let's just put it that way. And it's two components of energy that is irreducible and know-how that can only increase.
Mm.
The second thing that I take is metaphysical balances the physical. Always metaphysical, physical. And that metaphysical embraces the physical, both being infinite, but the metaphysical being always one tetrahedron greater than the physical. One tetrahedron greater than the physical. And then the metaphysical generalized capture and identification of the physical. It is only the metaphysical that can capture, that is the form, and identify what the physical is in an irreversible condition. Irreversible. And then the concept of design science, it said the concept of man on earth is to be spoken about as frequency modulated environment occupancies. So we actually have a designing, is about designing our habitat as co-occupant, humans and everything else on this spaceship Earth. And that's really the biggest thing I take away, is that responsibility. It says, if you know, you have to be 3 times responsible. Let me rephrase it. If you know and you apply, you have to have 3 times the capability to handle it. And that's what I take away. Otherwise, I wish you all an excellent weekend further. Right. And Joe, will you stop the recording or
Sure.
should I do it?
Well, once we close the meeting, it'll just automatically go right to Steve.
Okay. Because I could have stopped it here. Okay, anyway. That's
And
good.
and I just sent everybody actually one of our old meetups that we went to, meetings that we had with synergetic geometry of thought, where he goes through a lot of our a lot of the things that we talked about this evening with FM and AM, signaling and noise and elliptical movements. So you should have that in your emails in a minute. So yeah,
Excellent.
starting to make the connections between some of the stuff that we're going through and how we're ending up with Utopia and Oblivion. It's becoming slightly, more clear. Maybe it's because I wasn't in front of a computer for 10 hours today that I was actually seeing it a little bit more clearly, but I actually think the writing was a little bit more clearly. And it's great to have you here, Anne. It's nice to have you back. Are you going to be able to make it next week, hopefully?
I hope so, because now that things are opening up, literally every other weekend or so we have open days. This is the time for recruitment of students. So, yep. I'll let you know.
Are you
Can I
coming to
enroll?
South Africa, right?
What's
I know
that?
you coming to South Africa, you have a wedding or something?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, not. It's actually a few more. Oh, I guess maybe November. Yeah.
All right.
But I miss this every Sunday. Every time that I miss the sessions with all of you, I know I've missed a lot. So I think
That's
many
okay.
of us feel that way.
You're here more
Okay.
than most. So,
Thank you very much. And actually, Manu, your summary of it was just on point. Just on point. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Susan.
all right.
And then just I really think about Bucky's, you say geometry of thought and how to do, or geometry of thought and doing. I think is better described. It's just not thought, but really how do you design?
Right.
So it's looking at way, like how do you apply this? Thinking the application, yes.
It's the teleological aspect of it, the purpose.
Mm.
And then it is the how that's integrated very clearly, which is actually the most important thing. Both questions really need to be answered. And too many times we just think about the how and not the why.
Excellent. Otherwise, beautiful. Bye. Till next time.
Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
All right, bye.